Hello, everyone. Scientier here, and today I want to talk about something that I was thinking over. I didn't want to use the word about again twice in a row there, but that kind of just sounds like a weird sentence structure. Anyway, it's something that I was thinking about the other day as I was driving, and the idea, I don't have a really good way of putting a succinct title to it. I'll try to come up with one for the name of the episode, but what I was specifically thinking about at the time was the potential damage caused by labels like smart or stupid. These are labels of comparison where somebody is being measured against something else. Typically, these are being measured against sort of an aggregate average. So usually either a mean or a median. Mean just being, for those who are unfamiliar with the term, the average where you add everything up and then divide by the total number of things that you added up, whereas median is where you put everything in order and then find the one that's kind of in the middle, or if it's an even number, the mean of the two in the middle. So just for those who might be unfamiliar with those terms. So this is something that I was thinking about in particular just because the cause of my driving was going from a math tutoring job where I do math tutoring. And what I can see is sometimes the impact of the self-perception of these labels, or at least this is my impression, can really cause people to make unfortunate decisions about what they can accomplish. So in particular, if somebody, and this is kind of disconnected a little bit, but I happen to be thinking about it at the time. If somebody perceives themselves to be having the smart label, or rather other people consider them to be smart, then they can feel that they have to live up to that label. On the other hand, if somebody perceives himself to be thought of by others as stupid, then they might in fact try to live down to that label. And so I was just kind of thinking about this idea of how we compare ourselves to other people. It kind of ended up spiraling out from that initial root, that idea of smart versus stupid and that sort of thing. They're not useful terms, really, because as I was thinking about it, comparing ourselves to others in that sort of way is not useful. It's not really that useful, because that sort of comparison it's a poor comparison. The reason it's a poor comparison, it's that old saying, apples and oranges, right? Comparing our accomplishments to the accomplishments of others in that sort of way is not giving useful information. Like, it certainly gives some information, but it's not, depending upon how we're doing it, it's not giving useful information. And what I mean by that is, this might be a bit weird, because I'm trying to figure out how to word things clearly, and I think as a result of that, I'm kind of going around in circles. So kind of what I ended up reaching as a thinking point is that there's a difference between using somebody as like a measuring stick and using somebody as an inspiration. So what I mean by that is, if I look at, say, my, artistic ability, just to pick something at random. If I look at my artistic ability right now and I compare it to somebody else who has a lot more artistic ability than I currently do, then there's two ways that I can do that. I can either say, oh, I really like the amount of artistic ability that they have. I want to put in the effort to reach that sort of level of artistic ability. So in this way, it's an inspirational comparison to others. It's saying, here's somebody who has accomplished this thing. I would like to accomplish that similar thing. What can I do to achieve that? Right? And then at that point, I engage in the useful measurement technique of comparing my current abilities to my previous abilities. So in other words, I say, look at the sketches I made yesterday or a month ago or a year ago, if I were pursuing this particular path. And I say, how have I improved? How have I become closer to the goal that I have set? The inspiration. And that's a useful measurement, right? Because it is measuring growth. And fundamentally, when we're doing these sorts of comparisons, what we want to be doing, if we're, pursuing this sort of thing, is we're pursuing growth. If we're just comparing for no other reason, then it's great. What have you accomplished? Like, it's not relevant, because everybody's going to have some areas where they come up short compared to some other person that they're comparing themselves against, and probably vice versa, right? If you picked something else, it would be the other way. So what and the skills might be like perseverance or determination or grit, that sort of thing. They can be very much so different sorts of skills than what we perhaps automatically qualify as skills. Like there's lots of different skills, and the ability to kind of work at a problem until you figured it out and not give up, that perseverance, that is a skill, and it's a very valuable skill. So as I was kind of thinking about this sort of measuring growth, I can't measure my growth compared to where somebody else is at. All I can say is I want to get to where they're at, but in order to be able to measure growth, I have to see where I was to where I'm trying to go. And so if I'm saying, I want the big thing that I'm looking at here is there's a very serious issue in what can happen to us psychologically, I think, if we are looking at where somebody else is and we're comparing ourselves to that person or to some sort of average or something. So how developed am I supposed to be at this age? This is the big one that I'm really thinking about in particular, because we often don't, for one thing, we often don't put the points in the right spot. So, for example, if I look at how old I am and how old somebody, or if I look at somebody at comparable age who has more artistic skill, I can say, oh, I'm the same age as them. Why don't I have as much artistic ability as they do? Well, have I looked at how long they've developed that artistic ability? If I've put in the same amount of time, the same amount of effort, and I've not achieved the same result, then there's potentially something useful to analyze from there. But even then, it just might mean that I might have to put in more or less time than they did to achieve the similar capabilities. But that's not particularly relevant to anything. So what I think particularly becomes a problem is when we're like, oh, I should be hitting these particular milestones of development. And, looking at somebody else and saying, oh, they're, my age, they're much more capable in this than I am. I feel like I should be similarly capable. I'm not, therefore I must be inferior, and therefore I give up. Like, this can be a serious problem. On the other hand, there are two things that can happen from smart. One of which is arrogance, which is clearly obvious, right? Oh, I'm clearly ahead of everybody else, says the arrogant smart person. And therefore, I need to, or I get to lord it over everybody for being smarter than everybody else. And this is a terrible mindset. It's horrendously destructive and doesn't accomplish anything positive. The other one is sort of the opposite. It's kind of feeling that it's setting an expectation that you have to live up to being smart. And definitely people have talked about this, where it breeds a fear of failure. And again, what's happening here is how is smart even being measured is a very serious issue. Intelligence is one of those weird things. We seem to, in our current society, in this year, 2019, at the beginning of January, and certainly throughout much of my life, the way that I've understood people like to qualify or quantify or define smartness as a combination of two things. One, mathematical capability. How good are you at math? This apparently is supposed to be about how smart you are, but I don't know why. And then the second one is knowledge of trivia, which again is like, we have the internet in this day and age, for the most part. Knowledge of trivia, kind of a weird measurement of smartness when we can all just look stuff up. Like, it's not useful. It's not a useful intelligence. And like, being good at mathematics is great for some stuff, but like, honestly, it's not as important as people make it out to be. Like, once you get kind of the basics of algebra down, that's good for like so many people. And when I say basics of algebra, I mean things like a single variable, and you're using it for like finding an unknown in a fairly simple equation. I'm not talking about like algebra 2 type stuff. I'm talking about like pre-algebra to algebra 1 sort of area. And like, we use algebra subconsciously without really thinking about it, I think, in that sort of capacity of like, I have a singular unknown. I'm rearranging stuff to be able to solve that unknown. Like, a good example of this is, say you have $20 to spend, and you're trying to figure out how much you can kind of add up to get below $20 and that sort of thing. That there's a certain potential degree of algebra that might go into some of that. Or, I don't know, just different stuff like that. But anyway, I'm going way off topic. But I think what's useful is what I kind of said earlier, is to be looking at growth and development that way in relation to where we were, rather than in relation to where other people are at. Because then we can see how we are improving. We can see an encouraging comparison, hopefully anyway. Because if we look at where we were and we're ahead of that now, then we can be encouraged that we are making progress, that we are growing, that we are developing. If we try to compare ourselves to other people, then that becomes something that we can be chasing. And this is where it gets really tricky, because again, there's that inspirational line, right? If you're looking to the other person as saying, I want to work towards accomplishing something similar, I want to grow towards that person, right? That's inspirational. They're inspiring you. But if you're saying, why have I not become like them already? I should have this already. Then that is damaging. And it's sort of the difference of feeling like you have to win every race versus you're just trying to finish the race, right? And I think for most of us, most of the time, it's about getting the race finished, not about trying to win it. And if we're trying to win it, then I think it's going to be very, very painful, especially, and again, like I can see where there can even be, for some things, winning the race can be a matter of, and this is talking about a specific actual like race, right? There can be a lot of looking at your own growth, of like improving your times and that sort of thing. But a lot of life just doesn't work that way, right? For a lot of life, it's not a thing where we're like, growth is not a thing that you can race at, if that makes sense, in terms of like, you can certainly try to get there faster, but you can't repeat it. Like once you've learned it, you can't go back. Okay, now that I've learned how to learn it, I can't unlearn it to relearn it. It just doesn't make any sense. So I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of going in circles a little bit at this point, but just my basic end point of where I'm trying to get is we have a lot of different ways that we try to compare ourselves to other people. And I think a lot of them can do us a lot of harm. For example, one that I struggle with is I'm not as established in life as I feel like I should be for my age. But why should I be comparing myself to what society says that should be, or where other people are? I should be looking at, am I improving at what I'm doing? Am I growing? Am I developing in the ways that I want to be developing? And I think the answer to that is generally yes. So I can be encouraged in that. But that's measuring against my past self rather than trying to compare myself to other people. And there's a lot of times where we're pushed to try to compare ourselves to other people, to try to stack up somehow. But that's not what's ultimately going to make us happy. That's not what's ultimately... it's something that can make us very sad to try to do that. And so my kind of final point here, I suppose, is if we're looking to other people in this sort of way, it should be to be an inspiration to us. And then we should be measuring our own selves in the past, measuring ourselves against our old selves in our trajectory. Is our trajectory moving towards where we want it to be? But that's comparing where we were to where we are, because that's the only way we can really draw a valid trajectory. So those are, I guess, kind of what I wanted to say. And hopefully this can be encouraging to somebody. Persevere, seek growth, and don't, be careful about falling into that trap of saying, I should be like this other person. Why am I not like that other person? I'm terrible. You're you, and it's about your growth and how you're developing, not about instantaneously being where someone else is at just because of some arbitrary feeling that we ought to be. So, I don't know, hopefully I've not talked too much in circles. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here, and until next time, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.